welcome to series on tactics and strategy, Player's Guide, the Mandrakes. Well, we've got a lot to get through today with the Mandrakes. I've called them the elusive rogues, and it's been tough. It has been tough. Let's run through some basic information. So, Mandrakes are a 9-unit team. They can be built with a single box. In the box, you actually get 10 models. I think you get a spare warrior, just in case you need it. I would consider the Mandrakes a ninja team. Take that for what it's worth, I guess. They have a unique ranged mechanic in terms of their shooting, which we'll get into. They are currently a 44% win rate for competitive events, just looking at the meta numbers. They don't really have any build options, so to speak of, in terms of, you get 5 specialists and 5 warriors. Typically, there's no reason not to take a specialist, so the usual loadout is pretty much just always 5 specialists, 4 warriors. That's kind of what you run. I haven't found any real edge case to want to run 5 warriors over the 4 specialists, because the 4 specialists all come with unique abilities. So if you can come up with one, drop it in the comments for sure. We can have a chat about it. They do struggle into highly mobile melee teams. So Phobos, I think, is a good example of this. Goremongers, things that can get to them before they have a chance to do their shenanigans. I think the Mandrakes are advanced in their difficulty. I think the team has to be played pretty differently than what you typically used to. I don't know if this parallel has been drawn, but I think there's some similarities between the Mandrakes and the Rattlings in terms of difficulty, how to play them, the kind of caginess you need to entail to get good results, and also just how they feel. But we'll get into that as well. The team has multiple unique abilities, and you need to be using them as often as possible to generate as much value as you can. The hard thing is that all the units are 2 APL, which can just feel so limiting in your actions available. The team excels at scoring the tac op, and will often, in my experience at least, struggle with the crit op and the kill op, depending on the crit op and who you're going up against. So that take that with a grain of salt. I think that they can just constantly score tac. That's pretty straightforward, but the other 2 can be a bit of a struggle. So let's, just before we get into it, I just need a chance to ramble a little bit here. This team, oh my goodness, this team. I was so excited for the Mandrakes. I love the look of them. When I read through the rules, I was like, oh, Shadow's awesome. What a fun thematic thing to work with. The damage profiles looked great. They're pretty heavy hitters in melee. They're an elf team, so 8 wounds. You get 9 operatives, which is great, rather than 8 like the other elf teams. 2 APL was a little like, how's your father? But at the same time, having the extra operative, I thought that would make up a bit of a difference there. When I got to the table with them and actually, started to use them, what I realized was, having played the Void Dancer troop and that previously, that they are not a standard elf team. Basically, how they look and feel and how they play are 2 very different things. So this kind of brought me on to some of the struggles that I've had with the Mandrakes, and I'm sorry I'm prefacing all of this, because I just want everyone to be fully aware of how this team operates and make the best decision they can before looking into this team or deciding to pick them up. So with the Mandrakes, they've all got 4 dice, except for a few of the melee profiles on the specialists have 5. With the 4 dice, you have a ploy there that can give you an extra dice, which is great, but you can only take 2 hits in combat and sometimes in shooting, and you're dead. So you have to do this odd kind of dice dance with the other against opponents, where it's like you really need to be hitting 3 or 4 times in every action you do, and if you don't, you just fall short, and that kind of like rocks your confidence leading into the next point, because they feel capable, they look capable, the stats tell you that they're capable. But then the reality is that they struggle so much. Like the Void Dancers, to to offset this a little bit, the Void Dancers have the 3 APL, so they will typically, reposition, shoot, and then, cap a point. Or they will shoot, charge, and fight. Or they will fight, do their little ploy where they drop back and then shoot. Like, they've got the flexibility with the 3 APL to really, flex. The Mandrakes just don't have that. So you end up in a situation where you move and shoot, and then you're kind of stuck somewhere. Or you shoot and move, and then you've gone back in ground rather than moving forward in ground. Or you charge and fight, and the fight goes good, and then you're left out in the open, and you kind of are pretty vulnerable at that point, especially if you're not near shadow. Like, if the opponent knows the Mandrakes and just knows how to deny some of the Mandrake's key abilities, i.e. shadow passage and the whole shadow thing, you are just in a world of hurt. Contradictions wise, I think this is one of them teams where, once again, I had an idea based off the look of the team and the feel of the team. I had an idea based off the stat cards and the abilities, and then it's just contradictory between what you think is going to happen and what is actually going to happen. And then what I had to learn with this team is, whatever you want to do with this team, you do the opposite. Do you want to stage up aggressively and get ready to, try and get a TP2 charge? Don't do that. Do the opposite of that. Do you want to pop out and take a shot at a seemingly vulnerable target? Don't do that. Do the opposite of that. Do you want a shadow passage forward, to the opposite side of the board and set up a couple of operatives there that can pressure the backline? Don't do that. This is just one of them teams where every time I found myself trying to make a decision, I would be like, what do I want to do? And what does the team want me to do? I would do what I'd want to do, and then I'd end up regretting it later. So, all right, now that I've had a chance to just vent, let's get into the operatives. All right, let's talk about unit types. Night Fiend first. He's our leader. He's the strongest melee operative on the team. I think he needs to be moved aggressively compared to a lot of the other models on the team. The Harrowing Whispers is another reason to use him aggressively, in terms of the fact that you can potentially lock down, as many models are within his 6-inch range. So getting him close, turning point 1, to kind of capture 2 of the more aggressively placed enemy operatives on turning point 1 in going into turning point 2 is pretty nice. It's definitely worth considering that style of play with the Night Fiend, but definitely put him there with a warrior or 2, I guess. The Oubliex is great when it works, and if it does work, you've got 2 chances to use it. So the Oubliex comes online when you activate the model. If you activate the model, move him up, Oubliex is on, someone charges you, they hit you, you roll a 5 up for the Oubliex. If it works, if you get that 33% chance, you block the damage, you then strike back, it reactivates the Oubliex, and you have another chance to use it. If it doesn't work the first time, you can generally take 2 melee hits, like a crit and a hit usually, right, with a 4/5 profile. So that means that you have 2 chances to have it trigger. Otherwise, you've just got a dead Night Fiend. So keep that in mind. It looks cool. It is cool. But it just, if that was a 4-up or even, heaven forbid, a 3-up, that would be just great. It would just be so amazing. You could really pressure with the Night Fiend. But unfortunately, 5-up's pretty hard to make a lot of the time. Moving on to the Abyssal. The Abyssal, I think, is hands down one of the best and most reliable models on the team. I think a great way to use the Abyssal, especially on Volcus, is take the reposition scouting option. Get him up to some vantage or shadow passage him somewhere where he's got a good sight of the enemy team, and then Wreath and Balefire, one of the enemy operatives. That will make it so your damage profiles have a +1 against that model, and when he's shooting against you, you take 1 off the damage profile. So getting it onto like an enemy sniper or an enemy flamer or an enemy melter gunner is pretty important, I think, to keep that and maintain that there. His profiles with the shooting 5-on-3, 3-4 lethal 5 and soul strike, or 5-on-3, 3-4 blast 2. Blast 2 is great for horde teams just because it's so hard to avoid a 2-inch radius. It's very effective at getting them to play way more cagey than they would typically have to, because most things would be Blast 1, I guess. So really good way to pressure the horde teams, which you need a lot of help with. It's also great for implant because you can implant like 2 or 3 operatives, turning point 2. At that point, you don't have to be as picky about not killing a particular model. If multiple models have implant, then the next 2 turning points, what you got to do is worry about getting another implant off. He's definitely your most reliable ranged unit. So moving on to the Chooser of Flesh. Chooser of Flesh is a great model, but do not use him aggressively. The Soul Harvest is the only way the team has available access to 3 APL. But if you lose the Chooser, which is easy to do, he's got 8 wounds, he's taking that ability with him effectively. So you do get to keep the tokens that you've created while he's incapacitated, but you obviously can't generate more without him. So I think what you need to do with the Chooser of Flesh, he's got a great melee profile, but you need to use him to finish models off. If you've shot a model and they're on half health or within the 5 damage that is his profile, get in there with the Chooser and finish him off and get the Soul Harvest token. Do not run the Chooser of Flesh into an elite, because although he's got Brutal, 6 times 2 is 12. Let's see if you get 2 crits. If they've got 14 wounds, you're dead. You are just dying as long as they get 2 or 3 hits. So just keep that in mind. Part Collector's an ability that I've just never used. It's come up, when people will say, okay, I want to fall back, and I'll say, hey, listen, just remember I've got Part Collector. It's going to do 2-3 damage, and they're just like, oh, well, I just won't fall back. And it also works in direct opposition to your faction equipment, which is the Chain Snares. So it's kind of a bit of a frustrating ability. I don't think it's worth banking on. The Dirge Maul's up next. The Dirge Maul, once again, I was using like the Night Fiend in terms of bringing him up, using him as a nuclear deterrent. The Haunting Focus can be put on a model. It basically, whenever the Haunting Focus gets activated, you can activate the Dirge Maul first. Keep in mind that the Omni Scramble will trump this ability. If that unit's Omni Scrambled, you can't activate the Haunting Focus first, because the Omni Scramble prevents you from doing so. So just keep that in mind. That's a little trick I suffered through at one point. I think the Dirge Maul needs to be considered like a range support. He has the Horrifying Scream, which is just legitimately a great profile. Range 6, Devastating 2, so 2-4 profile pretty much. Seek Light, Stun, Soul Strike. Really good way to sink in some reliable damage there. Plus getting the stun off is huge. Seek Light also very important. And then the other half of it is, which I just didn't really start using until later on in the piece, is the Paradolic Protection. So any operative that's visible or is within shadow. So that means this works on Gallo Dark on the enemy as they're staging up in Turning Point 1, because they're all going to be along like a heavy wall. So you'll be able to use within shadow as a reference there. So that just gives them effectively a wounded stat. It's actually quite good, especially if they have like a key piece in place that they want to move up and be aggressive with. I'm kind of thinking of the fighter on the Plague Marines, for example. You can just make him injured from the get-go, which means that he's only moving up potential 4 inches and there's another 3 with a dash. So that's pretty handy. I think, this guy should be used as a support and a deterrent, not as like a in there kind of fighter a lot of the time, which is how I was kind of misusing him, I believe, initially. Okay, next up we have the Shade Weaver. This model's complicated. The Shadow Portal seems awesome. It basically creates a teleporting, 2 areas of the board which you can teleport between. Any one of your Mandrake operatives can use it. It counts as a reposition to do so, but then you can have a Shadow Portal open from one place to another and still use Shadow Passage on the other turning points. So that provides much more flexibility for the team to be super mobile. The problem is placing it becomes very hard, because it has all the same requirements as the Shadow Passage, which is can't be a valid target, can't be within control range, and once you've done it, you can't fight or shoot. So a crafty and a well-versed opponent will not provide you that opportunity to create a Shadow Portal or even a Shadow Passage to that degree. So at that point, it becomes very almost like a burden in some senses to have it and to try and use it, because you might compromise your own game just trying to get it somewhere instead of just staging up normally, I guess. Weave Darkness is a great defensive tool. It's just a smoke grenade though, and it doesn't remove you from being obscured you having obscuring while you're in it. That's kind of annoying. So it means that if you are in the Weave Darkness, you have obscuring shooting out of it as well as people shooting into it, which I don't know why. The Plague Marines, for example, their Cloud of Flies doesn't do that. But this one does, so that's kind of annoying. I wish it was just a little bit better. I think this guy I just consider a warrior with a smoke grenade, which, is better than a warrior without a smoke grenade. So that's pretty much how I play the Shade Weaver. I think a lot of the time you can kind of dummy with him to a degree and put your portal somewhere to try and spook the opponent into doing a particular thing or staying away from a particular area, but that would probably be the best case scenario a lot of the time, I found. You then have the Warriors. The Warriors are great little fighters. The Within Shadow adding 1 crit damage is huge, going to a 4/6 profile with lethal 5. That's quite nice. You're definitely going to get some work done. I think you combo it with the Paradolic Projection, the Wreath and Balefire, and just, once again, maximize that value. I use the Warriors basically as like a fanning screen to prevent oncoming threats and to push crit objectives. Basically keep your specialists safe while the warriors take the brunt of it. You only have 4, so you can't exactly just throw them away, but someone has to do that job. That's what they're there for. I wish I were a little hardier, but it is what it is at the end of the day. So, equipment considerations. Listen, let's start at the top. Let's just start at the top. Soul Gem's valuable into 10 or more model teams. It's got the 1-inch blast. Generally, if you tell someone you're taking Soul Gem and they don't have more than 10 models, guess what? None of them are ever within an inch of each other. That kind of makes it useless. I think you can threaten the Soul Gem and just say, hey, listen, I've got this piece of equipment available. It lets me turn my stuff into 1-inch blast. And then, don't take it, I guess, because they're probably just going to play around that. It's very easy to play around. Bone Darts is kind of in a similar place where it seems fun, it seems thematic, it seems on brand for what the Mandrakes want to do. The reality is that, very rarely are you in a situation where you need to take an obscured shot, and it only has a 6-inch range, which means you're generally close enough to be charging and fighting instead. I've definitely tried it and taken it and used it once or twice and just secured a kill with it, which has been nice, but you have a ploy that allows you to turn an operative from engaged to conceal. I think that ploy is of more value generally than the Bone Darts is. So you just take the normal shot with your normal profile, get the more damage off, and then if you really need to, spend a CP and just turn it back to conceal. Shadowglyph helps maintain a presence in dangerous areas to score tack and to score crit to a degree. Shadowglyph, I think, obviously has a lot of value in Into the Dark and on Beta Decima with the light barricades. It has a lot less value generally in Vulgus, but that depends on if you're on the Vantage or not, ultimately. So, just remember that, I think we'll talk about this later, but the Vantage on the large ruins doesn't count as heavy, so you don't get Shadow up there. But once again, we'll touch on that later. Chain snares should be considered against shooting teams, especially shooting teams that have higher wounds. I think to a degree, Scout Squad might be one of them teams where they have the 10 models, so it might be hard to chip through 10 in one turn. So if you do charge them and you only get a crit and hit, that's 9, or they parry you out. So at that point, the chain snares are very valuable, I think. However, on a 7, if you're going at Vanguard and they've got 7 wounds, you should be able to reliably do 7 wounds, hopefully, and then the chain snares are kind of irrelevant. With certain operatives like elites, you probably don't want to be stuck in combat with them. It probably needs to be more of a hit and run, or you need to be going in there to confirm a kill, not just trade. So that kind of turns off their usability. I think the Soul Strike works really well with stun grenades. If you can get up, throw a stun, and stun 2 or 3 people, it makes their save worse, I believe. So that could be something you could consider running. With this team, I generally find myself just taking barricades and razor wire to build a wall to just help slow my opponents down, so they come in drips and drops rather than a whole flood. I'll specifically maybe put this to one side of the board, so one side's very open and one side's not, and that might just funnel them down a little bit slower and allow me to pick them off rather than having to deal with multiple threats at a time. Because although you've got 9 operatives, as soon as you start to become overwhelmed, it really feels like it's game over. So the other handy thing is that this really slows down your highly mobile teams like your Goremongers and bits and pieces like that. Alright, moving on to Ploys. Creeping Horror, I think, is pretty important. It provides a pseudo 3 APL playstyle. It's usually relevant. I want to, kind of caveat that with, if you are staging nicely, I should say, probably not 100% perfectly, but if you're staging nicely, having a dash then begins to feel irrelevant to a degree. Where you want Creeping Horror to be a factor is the enemy move somewhere that would make them a valid shot. You would Creeping Horror an operative out, then you would activate that operative, you would take the shot and then reposition back into safety. That just doesn't happen as often as you would like it to happen. And because of that, some games I get so much value out of Creeping Horror, it's amazing. And other games I just don't get any value out of it. And I just am struggling to find a decent dash, that advances my position or doesn't compromise it in some way. So I think it depends on your play style. You'll know when you need it, I guess, is what I should say there ultimately. And sometimes you just don't. So very situational, great when it works. Kind of, if you've paid for it and you don't need it, it's a bit of a waste. Glooming Shroud's pretty amazing. I think generally you should just take this if you have the CP available for it. Retaining a defense dice plus a cover save makes you pretty hardy in a lot of times, in a lot of ways. So it's definitely worth having. You're going to want to be within shadow always anyway. So at that point, it's kind of almost a guarantee. But yeah, definitely consider Glooming Shroud. Blade in the Dark is pretty fun, but at the same time, you have the Firefight Ploy to do this kind of thing. It's very unusual that I find myself charging with multiple models in a turn and then needing to have them on conceal. Like a lot of the time there's just not enough space on the board to have this situation occur more than once or twice a turn. Blade in the Dark can feel like a bit of a trap with a CP in relation to that. Avoiding counteracts into elites, for sure, it has more value, but against the horde teams and teams that out-activate you, then you're not going to get as much value out of it. Inescapable Nightmare, you just take every turn, no matter what. It basically kind of makes you almost a 5-dice team with most of your profiles, which is pretty huge. It's shooting, fighting, or retaliating if it's within shadow. So once again, just be within shadow, never go out of the shadow. If you're out of the shadow, you're doing something wrong. You just get this. There's no limitations beyond the shadow. It's a win-win. So definitely save your CP for that. You're going to spend 3 on it no matter what. Okay, so they're out of sight. This is the one we just talked about. If you've got an engage order at the end of that operative's activation, you can change it to conceal. Very handy, very nice to be able to get up, take a shot, and then flip it back to conceal and just have him not be a valid target. Super handy ploy in certain situations. Once again, the firefight ploys I think are all great. So you're going to want CP available for them if you can. Soul Feast is one that you just use if you need to get a unit out of that wounded threshold. So below 4 health or below 4 health basically. 4 with the leader, the Night Fiend. So it has its place, but you're not going to have the CP available to use it every time you want to, basically. So just, remember that it's there. Remember it can get you up in the hits if you need to, and remove that wounded if required. But yeah, a lot of the time I end up just getting 4 HP out of it because you do a 2 APL operative, you hit them twice, they die, 4 health back. It's not nothing, it's fine, it's whatever. It sucks that it costs a CP, but it is what it is. So Nowhere to Hide, I think this one here is one of the most important things you have in terms of shutting down threats as they approach to you. So this allows you just to charge across the board as if nothing's in the way, no terrain or anything like that. You just have to end the move in a location where it can be placed, so not under a wall. This is really, really handy because a 9-inch charge in a straight line on most maps is pretty juicy, and it can be a really good deterrent. This combos really well with the Dirge Maul's ability, the Haunting Focus. And so basically you just say, listen, if I've put the token on this model, if it activates, I'm going to activate my Dirge Maul first. I'm just going to charge through all of this terrain and get to you. So, think about how you want to play with that. Leave it to the opponent. Let them do the mental gymnastics or how that looks. But it is a great ploy. I find myself using it maybe 1 or 2 turns a game, every game. And finally, we've got the Shadow's Bite. Shadow's Bite's another one where it's like, hey, listen, I have a ploy that if you charge me and fight, I fight first. So just keep that in mind. Just let them have that little tidbit of information, and it'll let them kind of question how they want to engage with you. I constantly remind my opponent I have this ploy, even if I don't intend I'm going to use it, purely just to try and get them to second guess their decision making and whether or not they're going to lose an operative to me. A lot of the time you don't have the CP. You're kind of playing Russian roulette with the fact that there might only be 1 or 2 CP left and you really can't afford it. You might need it for the next turn or something like that. So just keep in mind that it can be kind of easy to call your bluff there, but it is a fun little way just to, I think if you can overload your opponent with their mental decision making, and that just makes it easy on yourself at the end of the day. So a bit sneaky, but hey, we're playing Mandrakes, we're meant to be sneaky, right? Okay, let's talk general tips, how to play the team. Remember what is and what isn't Shadow. Always keep in shadow. Do not leave the shadows. You're a shadow boy. You're a shadow person. That's where you live. The shadows is it. That's just get used to it. Bring whatever you've got to do to remember to be within an inch of heavy. Be within an inch of heavy. Just make it happen. It's kind of non-negotiable with this team. As soon as you're out of shadow, all your stuff falls apart. Once again, as we discussed previously, the advantages on the large runes of Volcus are not shadow. So the strongholds are. The ruins are not. So just keep that in mind. If you get up there, you're not got access to the better saves and everything like that. Next general tip is do not play aggressively. I've just talked a bunch about being aggressive. Don't actually do it though. Like, just threaten it. Just threaten that you've got that aggressiveness there. This team really doesn't stand up as well in combat as it should, and you don't have the flexibility to do multiple points of damage in a single activation, i.e. a fight and a shoot. Because of that, you are a one and done operative kind of guy or girl. Playing aggressively doesn't suit that. So you kind of need to chip them down and then take them out methodically, not like get in there and slap like the Void Dancers would. That's been the hardest thing to learn because you've got great stats, you're fast, you've got the model count, it just feels like you should be able to do it. The reality is, in my mind at the very least, very different. Shadow Passage is great. Its limitations are important to remember. Once again, a good opponent will know what Shadow Passage can do, and they will never allow you to set it up, because if you try to, you'll always be a valid target. So keep that in mind. Use your warriors as the initial engagers. They're expendable compared to your more important units. Your tac ops are a double-edged sword with this team. What I mean by that is surveillance is, against an inexperienced opponent, a guaranteed 6 points. They can't do anything about it. You're gonna score 6 points. It's done. It's a done deal. A more experienced opponent will know you're going to take surveillance, and they will not let you get surveillance, in terms of they will position so you can't shadow passage, and they will then, because the enemy has to be a valid target for you to engage the surveillance, but you need to be on conceal. So they can work around that and prevent you the opportunity to get there and score it. So keep that in mind. I think having an alternate plan with confirmed kill or with implant, there are 2 other good options that you could work with. Don't always just rely on surveillance, even though it is dependable, because, yeah, like I said, a good opponent will just play around it at the end of the day. Always have CP available for Inescapable Nightmare. God, it feels bad if you don't have it, and you start rolling, a 1, 2 2s and a 4. You miss you miss the lethal 5 there. You've got one hit. It just doesn't feel good. So keep CP available for Inescapable Nightmare. It takes the team from being, reasonable to much better. I think although the Night Fiend and the Dirgeable should be on the front line, it's not always the best idea. Their abilities can, work well a couple inches back from the front line. Use your warriors to be the front line. And then hiding in combat's pretty important for this team to avoid being shot and bits and pieces like that. So tying down a big operative with a warrior, or a big threat with a warrior, and just leaving them in combat there is pretty important. I think that's where Implant kind of comes in nicely, because you can just kind of like parry or implant out a model to leave him in there, and that, that way you can kind of stage up. They're not going to want to charge and fight you because you have the bite ploy, so it gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more sneaky and a little bit more aggressive, hide in the combat there. Then when you start the activation, you fight and then charge the next model, basically, is kind of the theory, I think. Okay, more advanced tips here. Once again, Shadeweaver Shadow Portal, I think use it to mislead your opponents. Put it in an area where they're going to have to cover off, even though you have no intention of going there and you're just going to move up the board. It doesn't hurt to do that. I think it's a good way to pull them out of position and then exploit them differences there. Tac Ops selection can be difficult. Good players, like we just talked about, are going to know that you're going to take Surveillance as an auto pick. Bringing Heavy Barricade provides shadow and staging opportunities on like a more open map. So there's definitely a couple of Volcus maps there where shadow is a bit sparse towards the midboard. Putting in a Heavy Barricade, you've got to be within an inch of it. So if the Heavy Barricade's right on that 4-inch line, that gives you up to 5 inches there where you've got shadow available. And on an open board, or on ITD, for example, or in Beta Decima, that's pretty much a viable way to keep it alive. Keep you guys alive. I think into Horde teams, you can stage more aggressively and try and charge or lock down 3 opponents at once. So if you can charge into a group of 3 or 4 models with a warrior with the chain snares on, then that's a third of their team that all of a sudden you don't have to worry about. You can kind of start to narrow down on the other ones. So try and consider, if you get the opportunity to do that with the chain snares, they might have to just try and fight their way out, which, if you've got access to the healing ploy, you might be able to keep yourself alive for 2 or 3 fights, which would be pretty baller. That gives you a lot of space then for the specialist to get out and do some work. Don't get trapped into relying on the Chooser of Flesh's Soul Harvest ability. Just operate as a 2 APL team, and if you get it, it's a bonus. That's pretty much how I've been taking it. The next one is the Soul Strike stats. So elites kind of get a free pass to a degree with the Mandrakes. So typically they have a 65% chance to save, I believe it is, and a 33% chance to fail on an armor save. With the 3 APL, it takes it to 50% chance, which isn't as, I would like it to be worse. That's just me. But basically with the Soul Strike, if they're 3 APL unit, they have a 50% chance to save. 2 APL unit has a 30% chance to save. This is where the Immortals and stuff on the higher tech have a bit of a harder time. And then if you can get the stun off and get them down to 1 APL, then it's a 15% chance to save, which is pretty nice. So the Abyssal, I think, is MVP, most valuable player. It should be kept alive as long as possible. Balefire is a nice bonus to every operative on the team, both for offense and defense. And then Dirgemaul, I think, ultimately is a ranged support operative. A parabolic projection as often as possible, just to basically give an enemy wounded, keep them back, especially the bigger threats. Just keep them away. You don't have to have vision to apply it. They just have to be in shadow, which they typically will be to begin with. So yeah, I think they're the more important tips. Getting onto the conclusion here, same as usual for us at the moment. Understand your strengths and how to apply them. Understand your opponent's strengths and weaknesses. This team doesn't play kill team the same as other teams. You just need to, be aware of that. They do want to sneak around. It's not always easy given the map sizes and the amount of operatives you're up against, but you do want to pick and choose when to engage. You don't want to be just, going out there and trying to take ground and in bits and pieces like that, because that's not how the Mandrakes play. You have to maximize your specialist abilities to maximize the team's value. You need every edge. I don't think I talked about this, but The other similarity with I heard the Command Point, I believe, talking, or maybe it was not another Kill Team podcast, talking about this, where the Rattlings, they basically said that like every Rattlings win feels like everything's had to work perfectly to get a win. And I think Mandrakes is in the same boat. You don't ever play a game with the Mandrakes and pull off like a 20 to 7 point win, or I don't at least, and just have it be amazing and you're super comfortable the whole time. The whole time I'm playing the Mandrakes, I'm constantly, clinching, just praying for the dice to work, praying that my opponent's not going to, call my bluff, praying that I can survive 2 strikes in combat. It's really, you really have to fight for your wins with this team. I think that's kind of represented in the overall stats, but I think I averaged close to a 50% win rate with these guys, and every time I won, I was just like, man, I don't know how I did that. As I've won by 4 points. So yeah, not a super high scoring team usually. CP expenditure is tough to manage. You need all of it and all the time. I think what I did for a little while there, which worked pretty well, was like hoard as much CP as I can. Try and get turning point maybe 3 or 4 where the enemy is not on the ropes, but potentially on the ropes, and then just spend all of the CP to just try and guarantee as much value as you can. Take the heal, take the charge through everything, take the Glooming Shroud, just take it all, and just try and do as much damage as you can in a single turning point, and then go back to sneaking around. I found that against certain teams that worked pretty well. It just shifted the tempo into a really nice, like I was playing passive, super aggressive, and then back to passive again, kind of hit and run style. Like I said, you can do it. It doesn't work all the time, and it's if you've got the CP available. Generally you're spending 2 or 3 a turn, so you don't really have any to spare to do that kind of thing. But if you do find yourself in that situation, you can have a really good turning point, I think. Tac ops are obviously a bit of a conundrum. Try to outwit your opponent with what they think and think you can do. Once again, implants a pretty solid choice, I think, as well as confirmed kill, depending on who you're going up against. Try to just rely on operating as a 2 APL team. Soul Harvest is unreliable. If something goes wrong with your Chooser of the Flesh and he dies, you're not going to have access to it anyway. So it's better to keep him back, like I said, and try and use him as a finishing piece, and then hopefully get a Soul Harvest token or 2, than it is to count on having them. Once again, never leave the shadows. You are a shadow person now, if you're playing the Mandrakes. Try to avoid melee combat unless you're finishing a unit off. Try and, chip with the shooting if you can, or use the warrior to take off the first bit of health. And then the crit's hard to achieve with this team. I think scoring more than 15 or 16 points against a team is difficult, to say the least. This is not a super high scoring team. I think you're going to have to just take what you can get when you can get it. Once again, I'm no genius at this game. This is just, the past kind of 15 or 20 games. This is what I've kind of come to. And I have like an itch you shouldn't scratch. I have a desire to keep playing them, to just try and work them out, because I just feel so uncomfortable with the Mandrakes. That's probably what I'm going to do. And if I think this guide needs an update, I will definitely come back to it and redo it. So that's where we're at the moment. I really hope you gained something out of this. I'd like to thank you for hanging around. This has been a super rambly, all over the place kind of podcast, but it is what it is, guys. Good luck out there if you're doing the Mandrakes. Please let me know how you go. Let me know what I'm doing wrong, because I'm sure there's a fair bit of it. All right, that's it from me. Have a great day. I'll talk to you later.